Chapter 1. The Fear of Becoming. In my fear of becoming, I reached for things that made me feel anchored. I tried different paths, different identities, different versions of control. At one point, I even tried marriage, believing commitment could silence the uncertainty within me. I thought that if I could create enough structure around my life, I would no longer have to confront the restlessness within it. But control is fragile when it is built on fear. Eventually, everything I used to escape myself began to collapse. What I did not understand then was that fear rarely announces itself openly. Fear disguises itself in many ways. Sometimes it appears as hesitation, sometimes as perfectionism, and sometimes as decisions made too quickly, simply because stillness forces us to confront ourselves. Control built out of fear eventually becomes another prison. We speak of growth as though it is beautiful from beginning to end. We celebrate the outcome and admire the transformation. But growth is disruptive. It interrupts identities we thought would last forever. It challenges beliefs we once considered permanent. It asks us to question the stories we have told ourselves about who we are. Becoming does not only create, it also removes. It asks us to release versions of ourselves that once kept us safe. And sometimes, the greatest fear is not that we will fail. It is that we will become someone unfamiliar to ourselves. Many people say they fear failure, yet what they often fear is transformation. Failure allows a person to remain who they are. Transformation demands the surrender of familiarity. Becoming changes everything. It changes relationships. It changes beliefs. It changes identity. It changes the way we see the world and the way the world sees us. Some people remain trapped, not because they cannot grow, but because growth demands the death of familiarity. Familiarity offers the illusion of safety. Even suffering can become comfortable when it is predictable. People often remain in emotional prisons simply because the unknown demands courage. The unknown self can feel more terrifying than the unhappy self. There are moments in life when we quietly outgrow who we once were. Sometimes we notice it in a conversation that no longer feels like us. Sometimes we notice it in the exhaustion of pretending. Sometimes we notice it in the growing distance between who we are and who we continue trying to be. Yet many of us remain loyal to versions of ourselves that are already dying. We continue protecting identities that no longer nourish us. We continue carrying beliefs that no longer reflect us. We continue living inside definitions that have become too small for the person trying to emerge. Perhaps this is why becoming feels so frightening. It is not merely the fear of change. It is the fear of losing what is familiar. The fear of stepping beyond certainty. The fear of discovering that we are more than we once believed ourselves to be. Who are we really? Do we fear freedom? Is comfort the enemy of becoming? Perhaps identity was never meant to be permanent. Perhaps the self is not a fixed object, but a continuous unfolding. A lifelong process of discovery, release, and transformation. Becoming is frightening because it asks us to walk beyond the borders of who we have known ourselves to be. It asks us to trust what we cannot yet see. It asks us to leave behind certainty in exchange for possibility. For a long time, I believed fear was a sign to remain where I was. Now I understand something different. Fear often appears at the threshold of growth. It waits at the edge of transformation. It stands between the familiar self and the emerging self. Yet every meaningful transformation begins with the willingness to take a step forward, despite uncertainty. Perhaps becoming begins the moment we stop asking fear for permission to grow. And perhaps freedom begins the moment we allow ourselves to meet the person waiting beyond it.